clenched fist, bloody knuckles, scarce screaming until my vocal cords hit the point of God, it's nonsense. Wow. That just hits you, doesn't it? That raw nerve.
It really does, that feeling of being completely overwhelmed.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in the YouTube content of the artist Carnage.
Specifically, we're tracing these really powerful, recurring themes in his lyrics.
Exactly. Themes of regret, reflection, and, well, very real personal struggle. They seem woven right into the fabric of his work.
And what's immediately striking, I think, is the honesty. It's just unflinching.
Yeah, it's not just skimming the surface of emotions, is it?
Not at all. It feels like a deep dive, into the complexities of just being human.
And that's what we want to explore today for you, our listener. We've looked closely at a bunch of video transcripts from his channel, the Carnage 1nOnly channel.
Right, and also a couple of analytical pieces, sort of backgrounders on these themes in his music and songs.
So our mission, if you will, is to really unpack how these themes, regret, reflection, struggle, how they connect and show up in his lyrics.
And what that might tell us about his own journey, maybe.
And maybe even resonate with our own experiences, too. So let's start with regret. It definitely feels like a major emotional current in his work.
Oh, absolutely. It comes up again and again, and often with this directness that's quite arresting.
Like in Carnage, Dear Lord.
Exactly.
Huh.
When he says, "Can you please help me? I know I've been bad lately," and then right after, "Know that lately I've been shady."
It's so straightforward.
It is. It's a clear admission, isn't it?
Right.
Remorse for, recent bad actions, no filter.
And that kind of directness, it cuts through, doesn't it? It cuts through the usual kind of posturing you sometimes get in music.
Yeah, it creates this vulnerability that feels, well, surprisingly relatable.
That raw honesty. Yeah, it's powerful. And it's not just a one-off. In Carnage, how it looks, the regret is more about, like, relationships, right?
Yeah. The fallout there. Those lines about being a bad dad, bad man, even fucking bad husband.
Oof. Stark.
Very. And then he mentions the deceit on top of it. It's not just feeling bad, it's acknowledging the harm done.
The weight of it.
Precisely. And then you get to Carnage IME, and it gets even more personal, I think.
The apology.
Yeah, I want to say I'm sorry to my mom and my brothers. You can't get much more direct than that, expressing regret to family.
No.
And what's also interesting there is how he then talks about feeling smothered if he pulled away. It adds this layer,
Like it's complicated, regret mixed with obligation, maybe.
Could be. Hints at those messy emotional ties.
Then there's Carnage kept judging. He is looking back at mistakes there and the cost.
The cost being his connections. I've been honest for 4 years just trying to make it right, that I've been going about it all wrong, losing all my friends and family.
Wow, losing people because of his actions, that brings home the impact of regret.
It shows our actions don't happen in a vacuum. Right? The regret isn't just internal, it affects others. A ripple effect.
Definitely makes you think. And lastly, on regret, in Carnage Save Me, there's that underlying feeling.
Yeah, regret woven into feeling lost, questioning if he deserves his current pain.
Exactly. Like past choices created his present suffering.
Yeah. And what's clear across all these examples is the sheer range of situations sparking this regret.
Personal behavior, relationships.
Family, big life choices.
Yeah.
It paints this really multifaceted and, well, very human picture of dealing with the past.
Okay, so that's regret. Let's move on to the next layer, reflection. Because he's not just blurting out emotions, right? He seems to be really thinking about his life.
Definitely. There's a lot of introspection. And often, the regret we just talked about seems to be the trigger for it.
Like a catalyst.
Exactly. Back in Carnage, Dear Lord, after admitting he's been shady, he talks about wanting to bring back what I'm far from.
Right, and feeling unknown even while living in the fast lane.
Yeah, that shows him really thinking about where he is versus where he wants to be. And this idea of reflecting late at night comes up a few times too.
That feels universal, doesn't it? Confronting things when it's quiet.
It does. It suggests a real engagement with that inner turmoil, maybe deeper than you first realize.
That feeling of being adrift, even with external success.
Yeah, that's potent. And Carnage, how it looks, has that incredibly raw image.
Oh, yeah. Sitting up late in the middle of the night with tears rolling down your cheeks. Just a snapshot of painful self-reflection.
So visceral.
It is. And Carnage IME goes even deeper, I think. He talks about what burns inside of me, revisits past visions, nightmares.
And even writing itself, put this pencil to this paper, seems like part of that reflection process for him.
It does, like he's trying to figure himself out through writing lyrics.
Yeah, mapping his own internal world. And in Carnage Kept Judgin', the reflection is broader, more about his whole journey.
Right, a kid that found some glory through a history of violence to search for a place. I'm just trying to find a place for me in this land of misery.
I'm still standing with my feet firmly planted.
Yeah.
It's not just noting the struggle, it's making sense of his path.
Finding resilience through reflecting on the hard stuff.
Exactly. Recognizing the pain, but also his own strength to endure it.
And we see this reflective quality pop up elsewhere too, right? Like carnage over now.
Mm-hmm. Looking back at testing limits of a dangerous mind and kind of coaching himself. Got to keep your head up. You're going to let yourself down.
Self-correction through reflection.
Yeah. And Carnage Save Me is soaked in reflection on his pain, that longing for relief. Asking, can you tell me what it looks like to live a life with no grief?
Ooh. Honestly, I'm so weak. Restless nights, no sleep. That vulnerability, just asking to imagine a life without grief, it's telling.
It says so much about the weight he carries, doesn't it? And his desire for just peace.
Yeah.
And we have to mention Carnage Stairs. The whole song is basically one big metaphor for reflection.
Right. Each step representing looking back at hardships, the climb towards improvement.
It's this extended meditation on overcoming things, pausing to consider the journey with each step, metaphorically speaking.
Absolutely. And then the reflection in Carnage Stay gets incredibly dark.
Extremely. Directly confronting mental health struggles, even suicidal thoughts. That line, I tried to hang myself out in the news, bro.
Just incredibly raw, reflecting on such a crisis point with that kind of honesty.
It's chillingly direct. And finally, Carnage Uncomfortable. The whole song feels like a reflection on just unease.
Yeah, uncomfortable in my skin, sitting in my head, watch the world spin. A constant internal commentary on his own state.
So across all of these, what really jumps out is the depth and the honesty of it all.
Yeah, it's not just passing thoughts. It feels like a real, often painful grappling with his life.
Which naturally leads us straight into the third big theme, personal struggle. It feels like the foundation for a lot of the regret and reflection.
Makes sense. And his music is just saturated with these struggles, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like the inner demons, the mental turmoil. Back to Carnage, dear Lord. All these demons, they got my mind racing.
You can almost feel that anxiety, that mental noise.
It's a powerful image of mental unrest. And you hear echoes of that in Carnage Uncomfortable, too, that internal conflict and anxiety. Yeah. The title says it all, really.
A struggle just to be.
Yeah. And then the struggle really shows up in relationships. Carnage, how it looks, feeling like a bad husband, that creates isolation.
And that feeling links back to regret, but it's also just a fundamental struggle to keep connections healthy.
Totally. Man, Carnage IME states it so clearly. I'm losing all my family, neglecting all my friends. That struggle with isolation, broken ties.
And feeling out of place in Carnage Kept Judgin', it reinforces that sense of disconnection, like he's fighting for a sense of belonging.
Right. Wrestling with where he fits. Then there's the struggle with self-worth, identity.
Those lines in Carnage, how it looks again. I'm a bad dad, I'm a bad man.
It's so self-deprecating. And in Carnage IME, that line, I am eating something you will never be. It's defiant, but maybe also hints at struggling with feeling different. Misunderstood.
That line is interesting. Feeling separate, maybe because of his experiences or his persona. And we can't ignore the struggle with negative behaviors, possible addiction.
Right. Hints in Carnage IME about being hooked on smack-a-dope, but not me, must stay true. But then in Carnage Stairs, he's explicit. Victim to my own addiction.
A stark admission.
Yeah, acknowledging that openly is a huge part of his struggle narrative. And of course, mental health overall.
It's a constant thread.
In Carnage IME admitting, yes, I do have issues, so it's hard to grow up. And Carnage Stay just lays bare the suicidal thoughts, feeling like a burden.
That transparency is, well, it's courageous. And sadly, probably very relatable for some listeners.
Definitely. But importantly, amidst all this struggle, there's also this thread of fighting back, of trying to overcome.
Yeah, the climbing stairs metaphor you mentioned, that resilience.
Exactly. And even in Carnage Kept Judgin', while reflecting on loss, he still says, I'm still standing.
Perseverance.
That determination, refusing to be completely defined by the struggles, it's a vital part of the story. It points towards, effort, towards healing.
Absolutely. And the way he portrays it all, just raw and unguarded. No sugarcoating.
Which brings us to a really key point. These themes, regret, reflection, struggle, They aren't separate silos in his music,
No, not at all. They feel completely intertwined.
deeply interconnected.
It really feels like a cycle sometimes, like a big regret happens, and that forces the reflection.
Precisely. You can easily see how regretting hurting family, for example, would naturally lead to some intense thinking about why that happened, what led to it, the consequences.
It's human nature, right, to look inward after messing up.
It is. And both the regret and the reflection often seem rooted in those ongoing struggles we talked about, the inner conflicts, relationship issues, self-worth battles.
It all feeds itself.
And it works the other way, too. Reflecting on a current struggle, say, the mental health issues in Carnage Day could easily stir up regret about things done in the past, or maybe not getting help sooner.
Right. It's not neat, is it? It's messy, like real life. One thing bleeds into another.
Exactly. It's not linear. It's this complex interplay. And that's what creates such an authentic, powerful, emotional landscape in the music.
It feels real because our own feelings aren't usually tidy and separate either.
And that interconnectedness gives it such depth, I think. It goes beyond just simple emotion. It's a more nuanced picture of being human.
Which makes you wonder about the purpose of it all, for him and for us. Is there something therapeutic here? Cathartic, maybe?
That's a really interesting and I think important question to ask. By wrestling so openly with these darker parts of his life.
The regret, the tough self-examination, the ongoing battles.
Yeah. He might be finding a really vital outlet, a way to process it all. It takes guts to be that vulnerable publicly.
A lot of guts. And for listeners, hearing someone articulate those raw, uncomfortable feelings, even the really dark stuff, maybe that creates a connection, validation.
I absolutely think so. It's like hearing your own inner monologue reflected back sometimes.
Because these experiences, regret, reflection, struggle, they're universal, aren't they?
Pretty much everyone deals with them. So hearing them voiced so honestly might make listeners feel, less alone in their own difficulties.
Yeah, kind of shared humanity.
Exactly. Comfort in knowing you're not the only one facing that kind of inner turmoil. That honesty can break down walls, build empathy.
That, hey, I get that feeling, even if the details are different.
Precisely. A real connection between artist and listener through that shared vulnerability.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Carnage's lyrics, we've seen how regret, reflection, and struggle aren't just separate themes.
No, they're woven together, tightly, creating this really compelling, authentic, emotional core.
Giving us a pretty revealing look into his journey, the remorse, the deep thought, the ongoing fights.
Yeah, it's a window into the complexity of navigating life's rough patches. That cycle of past actions, present awareness, ongoing struggles.
And it leaves us, and you, our listener, with maybe this final thought to chew on. What about the act of sharing all this vulnerability publicly, through music?
Is that weakness?
Or is it actually a profound kind of strength? A testament to resilience? What does it mean to you personally when an artist goes there, explores these darker, harder parts of being human so openly?
It's definitely something worth thinking about. And if this has intrigued you, check out Carnage's YouTube channel.
Yeah, hearing the lyrics in context with the music, the visuals,
Yeah.
that might offer even more insight.
It can be an intense listen, for sure.
No doubt. Raw, emotional, but ultimately it resonates with the complexities of just being human. Thanks for taking this deep
So
dive
you're
with
here
us
because
today.
you want to get smart fast.
Yeah.
You want the core ideas,
Yeah.
right? Without getting totally bogged down in all the details.
Exactly.
And that's what we do here at the Deep Dive.
Mhm.
So today, we're diving into this really fascinating collection you sent over. There's audio about consciousness and language,
Mhm.
a study guide with some really interesting prompts, and then some, pretty intense lyrical stuff.
Very personal, yeah.
So our mission, basically, is to cut through it all, find those surprising connections, those kind of aha moments,
Yeah, find the threads.
Exactly, without making your brain melt.
Right. It's quite a mix. You've given us, it touches on how we see reality, the actual tools we use, like language. And then, the really raw stuff, our inner lives. It's about tracing how these things, which seem pretty different on the surface,
Totally different.
actually link up. And that's where I think the interesting stuff happens.
Okay, yeah, I agree. So let's dive right in. This idea of consciousness being the bedrock of how we experience things.
Yeah.
One of the lectures you shared makes this really powerful point, that consciousness, sometimes called I am, is the main force creating your reality.
So raw, yeah.
It even suggests it's not like separate from some bigger divine thing, but it's our individual piece of it.
Yeah.
How does that idea hit you initially?
Well, what's really striking is the the agency it gives back to us,
Right.
The idea that your basic awareness, that sense of just being, isn't just watching things happen,
No.
but it's actively shaping the world you live in.
Actively.
The lecture really hammers this point.
Yeah.
Whatever you are conscious of being, that's what you experience. Like, your consciousness is a projector.
Okay.
What you focus on inside,
Right.
that's what shows up on the screen, your reality. So if you're constantly thinking, I can't do this, well,
That's what you see.
that's likely the reality you're going to bump up against.
Right. And it gives these really direct examples that honestly feel almost too simple sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like thinking I'm unwell brings on feeling unwell, or focusing on I'm insecure.
Manifest that insecurity.
Yeah. But then it brings in imagination. That's the key tool, it says, the consciousness uses to actually do this shaping.
Exactly. The lecture calls imagination like the offspring of consciousness. The engine room, kind of.
The engine room, I like that.
And the process it describes is pretty neat. You vividly imagine and feel the outcome you want, like it's already happened. You soak in that feeling.
You live in it.
You live in it, yeah. And by doing that consistently, dwelling in that imagined state, it starts to become your actual experience. It's about really feeling the wish fulfilled emotionally.
And it even reframes desires, doesn't it? Not just random things we want, but like the spoken words of this I am. Blueprints almost.
Yeah.
For potential realities, just waiting to be expressed through us.
Yeah.
That's a really potent way to think about those, persistent things we long for.
It really is. It shifts desire from something outside us that we're chasing
Yeah.
to a more like an internal compass, pointing to potentials already inside us, just waiting for our awareness and our imagination to, bring them out.
Bring them into being.
Yeah. It completely flips the script on how we think about getting what we want in life.
It really does.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of those ideas that can spark a real aha moment. Like, wait, maybe I have way more influence here than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Another really interesting piece you included was a lecture on language, its power, and what are called hidden truths. Feel like a different lens on how we build our world.
It's a good follow-on, actually, because if consciousness is the architect,
Right.
then language is definitely a primary tool, both for our inner thoughts, that internal chat, and for how we interact out in the world, shaping things together. The lecture kicks off with this really cool concept, contronyms.
Contronyms.
Yeah, words that mean opposite things, like the classic example, sanction.
Oh, yeah, they can mean approve or punish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with these weird words?
Well, the lecture suggests this duality, this built-in opposition, actually mirrors how complex and sometimes contradictory human thought and intention can be. It shows how one word, one tool, can be used and understood in totally different ways. It depends on the context who's speaking.
And what they're trying to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that language isn't always this super precise thing we think it is.
Definitely not. And then it gets into irony, how that works in stories to like point out contradictions or mess with our assumptions. The Kenneth Anger example was interesting, this idea of backfooting, where he's kind of celebrating Hollywood, but also critiquing its whole mythology at the same time.
Yeah, I like that. It's like holding two opposite ideas together, right?
Exactly.
Create something richer, more complex. Makes you think how often we do that ourselves, admiring something, but also questioning it.
It really speaks to how complex we are and how art often reflects that back to us. The lecture also mentions how language evolves using awful.
Oh, yeah. Used to mean full of awe, right? Awe-inspiring.
Right. So why does that matter, the words change like that?
Well, it's just a great example of how language is alive. It's dynamic.
It's not static.
Not at all. Words change meaning over time, reflecting how culture shifts, how we understand things differently, shows that even our basic communication tools have histories, echoes of what they used to mean.
Exactly. And the lecture sort of hints at this idea of Easter eggs, too.
Hidden meanings.
Yeah, hidden meanings tucked away in language, in stories, which ties back to what you said earlier about wanting to dig deeper.
Right.
It suggests if we really pay attention to the words we use, the stories we tell, we can find these extra layers of meaning that aren't obvious right away. So even in one word, you see context and intention shaping meaning.
Just like consciousness shapes experience.
Yeah, exactly. There's a parallel there.
Okay, which brings us pretty naturally to the last section for this deep dive. The lyrical bits you shared. Themes of inner struggle, healing, connection. This feels like the most emotionally direct stuff.
It's definitely a shift emotionally. We move from these more, abstract ideas
Intellectual.
to really intimate expressions, pain, despair, even some hints at really dark thoughts like suicidal ideation.
Heavy stuff.
Very. But what's really striking is how these incredibly tough inner states are framed. They're presented as a possible catalyst, as one bit says,
A catalyst.
for creative expression and even as a lifeline for healing.
That's a powerful paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
That the really dark, difficult places inside can actually fuel transformation.
It is.
The excerpts talk about music changing from just like coping
Hidden by.
for being this deep release, and also the deliberate use of healing frequencies. That caught my ear. Trying to use sound to help growth and unity.
Yeah, that's interesting. The conscious use of sound as therapy.
Right.
The idea that certain frequencies can resonate with us, maybe influence our emotions, even our bodies in a good way.
Yeah.
And it links up to that bigger idea of connection, the one and all thing that pops up.
The interconnectedness.
Yeah, suggesting our individual stuff isn't just happening in a vacuum. Our joys, our pains, they're like ripples in this shared human experience, affecting others, being affected by them.
Right. That feeling that you're not alone in it.
Right.
That your struggles echo something bigger. One
Yeah.
part talks about transformation involving facing your demons and celebrating your scars as doorways to light. That's a really striking image.
It is. It reframes those past wounds, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not as shame, not something to hide,
Yeah.
but as parts of your story, things that shaped you that can even become sources of strength, maybe wisdom. And empathy seems really key here, too.
How sharing stories helps.
Yeah, the idea that our shared stories can actually lift each other up, support each other.
And there was also a mention of journaling as a way to connect the individual to something bigger called the divine, I think,
Mhm.
and how it helps document that journey, from turmoil towards feeling empowered. Seems like a really practical thing anyone could do.
Oh, absolutely. It's a concrete way to get those internal things out, track how you're doing, see patterns maybe.
See progress.
Yeah. The excerpts also hit on finding beauty and strength even in the messy, vulnerable parts.
Amidst the chaos.
Right, and how those struggles can build resilience, lead to renewal, like waves shaping rocks,
Yeah.
that constant pressure creating something new.
So when we try to weave all this together, the power of consciousness, shaping reality, the
Yeah.
complexities and tricks in language, and this really human journey of struggle leading to healing and connection, it feels like these threads start making a pretty coherent picture.
They really do. The audio even mentions how the lines are blurring, between science, philosophy, spirituality.
As we try to figure things out.
Yeah, as we try to grasp what existence is all about, it suggests these different ways of looking at the world aren't necessarily opposed. They might offer, complementary views.
And listening to those raw freestyle lyrics, those feelings really come through, don't they? Feeling lost, overwhelmed, wanting peace.
That inner turmoil.
Yeah. And it makes you circle back, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How much might our dominant moods, our assumptions, the stuff we talked about first with consciousness, be feeding into those states?
It brings it right back around, yeah. Our inner world, shaped by our awareness, expressed through our words,
Directly impacts how we feel.
directly influences our emotional experience, and then art, music, writing becomes a way to process that, maybe even change it.
And I thought that analogy near the end was really powerful, comparing sunset and dawn.
The cycles.
Yeah, just reminding us that struggle ends and endings lead to new beginnings, always possibilities. It's a hopeful note woven through all that rawness.
It really highlights that cyclical nature of life, doesn't it? That rhythm of challenge and renewal. It's a strong reminder, even when things feel dark, that potential for a fresh start is always there.
So wrapping this up for everyone listening, we've taken this deep dive into, the incredible power of your own consciousness to shape your
What
reality.
experience, yeah.
The fascinating, sometimes tricky nature of language, how we use it to make sense of things.
And connect or disconnect.
And that really deep human journey of facing struggles and how that can actually lead to healing, to connection.
And maybe as you chew on all this, we'll leave you with something to think about. How might your own typical moods, your sort of default assumptions about things, be actively creating the reality you're living right now? And what kind of hidden truths, maybe, are sitting there in the language you use every day, your inner talk, how you speak to others?
Yeah, what's hiding in plain sight?
Exactly. Maybe think about how your own inner experiences, even the really tough ones, could actually become fuel, catalysts for growth, and for connecting more deeply with that one and all.
It's definitely a lot to ponder. We really hope this deep dive gave you some useful ways to think about it all. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for All joining right, us. so We'll you've put explore together something a new next really time. intense collection for us this time. We've got lyrics, some really thoughtful analysis, and even transcripts from Carnage's own YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's quite the package.
It really is. And it's clear you're looking to understand, the core of what fuels his art. And that's exactly what we're going to try and do here. We're diving deep into these sources to unpack some powerful themes that seem to hit really hard.
Yeah.
Betrayal, the gritty reality of artistic struggle, the pain of loss.
And that anger is a really raw, almost physical kind of anger running through a lot of it.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating about the material you've shared is how these different angles, the direct emotion in the lyrics, the more maybe detached analysis, and then Carnage's own unfiltered voice in those transcripts, they really create this multi-dimensional picture.
Right.
So our goal is to synthesize all of this.
Yeah.
To pull out the most compelling insights into Carnage's creative world and, well, the experiences that seem to drive it.
So think of this as your streamlined guide. We're going to try and cut through the sheer volume of material here and focus on the central metaphors Carnage uses, those intricate relationships he portrays, and that incredibly raw emotional landscape he navigates.
Yeah, get to the heart of it.
Exactly. We want to give you a real understanding of what's really going on. Okay, so let's unpack this. And it feels right to start with a theme that just seems to echo really loudly across these sources. That crushing weight of betrayal. This really comes into sharp focus in the track Carnage Da Vinci Code, Okado.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at those lyrics you provided, the theme of betrayal is like immediately apparent. And the way Carnage frames it as artistic theft in Da Vinci Code, Okado, that's particularly insightful, I think.
So?
Well, he accuses this homie, Solo Da Vinci, who he sometimes also calls Gato, breaking a fundamental code.
Right.
Which suggests that for Carnage, loyalty isn't just, personal expectation. It's like this deeply ingrained principle.
And that metaphor he uses, stealing his Mona Lisa, this whole idea of copyright infringement, it's not just about a personal slight, is it?
No, not at all.
It's like his creative work, his actual art, his intellectual property is being violated. It suggests that for Carnage, his art isn't just like a job.
Exactly. It's deeply intertwined with his sense of self, his personal integrity.
And then you've got that really blunt line, fuck with a chick, fuck up a friendship, just laying bare another whole layer of that broken trust.
Precisely. It elevates the personal betrayal to this level of artistic violation, which makes it feel even more profound,
Yeah, absolutely.
What's also quite poignant is the recurring mention of Cato, this deceased mutual friend.
Oh, right.
When Carnage asks, could you ask Cato, could you still say it's okay, though?
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks volumes. It's interesting how Cato becomes this almost like sanctified figure.
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, could it reflect a sort of yearning for a lost sense of community? Or maybe a simpler time before all these betrayals happened?
It really does feel like Cato represents some lost ideal, doesn't it? Like a moral compass that's just not there anymore to give guidance or validation. And the sense of broken trust, it's not just in that one track, is it? We see glimpses elsewhere. Like in Carnage, Funny Ain't It, there's this feeling of guilt, like he's been made a fool of.
Yeah, and what stands out in Funny Ain't It, connecting back to betrayal, is that line about fake bitches feeling guarded from the snakes only taste venom.
Ugh.
It paints this picture of an environment just saturated with insincerity, where betrayal feels almost inevitable, like it's just part of the territory.
And then if you look at Red Flag's freestyle sample, you hear about people talking behind his back, that sense of inauthenticity. And there's that incredibly raw, direct line, I used to love you, I hurt, but fuck you.
Wow, yeah.
That's just the sound of a relationship completely fractured by betrayal, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, those repeated references to a bro code being broken, that really underscores the depth of this violated loyalty.
Right. This wasn't just some random person.
Exactly. This was someone within a close inner circle, which just amplifies the impact of the betrayal massively.
Okay, so this theme of betrayal clearly casts a long shadow across Carnage's work. But another really compelling element you highlighted in the material is the artist's own pain and how he sort of asserts his identity amidst all this turmoil. That line in Carnage Da Vinci, Okado, pain on the canvas, blood on the carpet. I mean, that's such a visceral image.
It is, isn't it? It immediately forges this link between suffering and the act of creation. The pain isn't just a personal burden. It's almost like a raw material for his art.
Yeah.
There's this sense that these intense emotions are being channeled like directly into his creative output, whatever form that takes.
And yet, despite this apparent pain, there's this really firm assertion of his artistic credibility. He declares, "Don't you know that I'm an artist? I've been doing this shit. My work is well respected."
Right.
It's like he's saying, even when I'm grappling with these personal wounds, my foundation as an artist, that remains unshaken.
That assertion of identity feels almost defiant, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
It's as if the betrayal isn't just a personal attack, but also somehow a challenge to his artistic standing, and he's pushing back hard against that.
Then you brought our attention to the mannequin metaphor in the track with the same name. That's another really striking image. What were your initial thoughts on what that represents, especially with the other themes we've talked about?
Well, what's fascinating about the mannequin image is how vividly it portrays this feeling of being controlled, manipulated.
Right.
The lines, "Treat me like a mannequin, hold my hand, teach me how to stand again." They speak to a profound sense of powerlessness, of being treated like an object without any agency.
Like you're just being posed.
Exactly. And as the analysis you shared suggests, this could certainly relate to personal relationships, but it could also speak to those often, frankly, exploitative dynamics within the music industry itself.
It speaks to a real lack of autonomy, doesn't it? Feeling like you're just being moved around. But then later in that same track, there's this really powerful shift in tone.
Yeah, there is. The lines, "I got my own show and I got my own crowd. I couldn't feel you then and I cannot feel you now." They mark a really clear turning point. It's an assertion of independence, a reclaiming of control, and a recognition of his own strength and his own following. It's such a stark contrast to that earlier vulnerability of being the mannequin.
It's like he's broken free.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's broken free from those controlling forces.
Found his own footing, no longer needs that external support or control. Now, alongside the betrayal and the artistic struggle, the material you've given us also touches on loss, and there's this sense of addiction's shadow kind of lingering in the background.
Yeah, that comes through too. The most direct and quite poignant mention of this is back in Carnage Da Vinci Code. Okay.
Oh.
Yes, we suffered addiction, and now we suffer that loss, and he is no longer with us. That explicit acknowledgement of a shared addiction, and then the subsequent loss of a friend, it just adds another layer of grief and pain to the whole narrative around the betrayal.
Yeah, it really does.
It intensifies that feeling that something sacred has been violated, especially given that shared history of struggle.
It makes Cato's absence feel even more significant, doesn't it? He's not just that moral touchstone, he's also a reminder of the shared past that included both hardship and, well, loss.
And while it's maybe more of an implication, sort of a darker undercurrent, you could perhaps interpret that line from "skin and bones put a needle in my eye"
Right?
as a potential allusion, even if it's metaphorical, to self-destructive tendencies or the shadow of addiction that the analysis points out.
Yeah, I see that.
It hints at a certain willingness, maybe, to inflict pain upon oneself, whether that's physical or emotional.
It definitely suggests a certain darkness, some internal conflict. Okay, now shifting gears a bit, another really prominent theme that just jumps out from your collection is this raw intensity of aggression. It's kind of hard to miss.
Absolutely not. Yeah, the persona presented in Carnage Halloween by Carnage 1nOnly is a prime example. The violent imagery is just stark, unapologetic. I just took a life and I ain't feeling empathetic. Bodies falling to the ground.
Yeah.
And then that declaration, "I'm bringing the season of carnage,"
Yeah.
it really establishes this menacing, destructive presence.
It's a full-on embrace of a destructive force, isn't it? And that level of graphic violence seems to escalate even further in Carnage Trouble Revised Freestyle. Some of those lines are genuinely shocking.
They are. The smothering peanut butter line is particularly disturbing and pretty memorable in a dark way. And the explicit desire for the sound of your bones popping, I mean, it leaves very little to the imagination.
No kidding.
It's a very visceral, unsettling expression of anger and a desire to inflict extreme pain.
It almost feels performatively violent sometimes, Like he's adopting this hyper-aggressive persona, but then you contrast that with something like Carnage Ringleader. You see maybe a slightly different shade of aggression.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's different there is the adoption of a more dominant, almost regal king persona. The image of an elephant sitting on your chest conveys this overwhelming sense of power and control. It's more boastful, maybe almost theatrical display of aggression, as if he's sort of relishing being in a position of dominance.
Like he's putting on a show of being in control, but then when you revisit Red Flag's freestyle sample, that aggression feels much more immediate, right? More personal, less like a performance.
Exactly. The direct threats and that stated intention for confrontation. No, once I see you, I'm rushing. That feels much less like some constructed persona and more like a raw expression of anger and a genuine readiness for a physical fight.
So it's a really multifaceted aggression we're seeing here. It ranges from this almost theatrical dominance to these deeply personal and frankly violent threats. Now, moving beyond these more negative emotions, your collection also reveals complexities in how relationships are portrayed, particularly romantic ones.
Yes, definitely. It's not all just about betrayal and anger, thankfully. In Carnage Mad for You book, there's a real sense of confusion, lingering emotions after a relationship has ended.
Right.
The lines, maybe I'm mad for you, maybe I'm just mad you moved on, and the questioning, who's the father to that kid and who are you? I mean, that reveals a tangled web of unresolved feelings, maybe potential further betrayals or complications.
There's a real vulnerability kind of peeking through there, isn't there? Despite the anger and suspicion underneath.
Mm-hmm. And when we look back at Skin and Bones, we see another layer of complexity in relationships, this time focusing on that dynamic of control and emotional depletion.
Talk about that line.
The line, treat me the skin and bones, I ain't got a heart and soul, suggests a relationship where one person feels just utterly emotionally drained, objectified, as if they've been reduced to nothing by the other person's treatment.
Yeah.
It echoes that mannequin theme we discussed earlier, but with a slightly different emotional feel, focusing more on the feeling of being hollowed out.
Like they've been completely stripped bare, physically and emotionally. And then you have Still Do Freestyle by Carnage 1nOnly, which shows a really interesting evolution of emotions towards a past relationship.
Yeah, that one's striking. What's notable there is the progression from missing someone, even resenting that he still does, to a point of eventual forgiveness and, interestingly, a desire to be alone.
Right. That shift.
Paul lines, used to hate that I miss you. Sometimes I think that I still don't. But now I'm not half that I forget you, but I forgive you. They really showcase an emotional journey, right? A grappling with letting go and finding some kind of peace.
It suggests that even amidst all the turmoil and aggression, there's a capacity for reflection, maybe even forgiveness, however difficult that process might be.
Seems so.
Finally, we should probably touch on this idea of persona and performance, because it really seems to be a consciously used element in some of these tracks.
Absolutely. As we discussed with Ringleader, the very concept of being a ringleader is inherently performative. He's deliberately adopting this dominant role for his audience. And the stark contrast with the manipulated mannequin is quite telling. It suggests an awareness of the different roles he can inhabit, perhaps even highlighting the constructed nature of some of these personas.
It's like he's consciously choosing which mask to wear for different situations or different artistic expressions.
Right. And even in Carnage Funny Ain't It, that self-aware use of setup for the punchline reveals an understanding of like comedic timing and audience expectation, further underscoring this performative aspect of his work.
So it raises a really interesting question, doesn't it?
It does. To what extent are these raw emotions and aggressive personas a genuine reflection of his inner world? And to what extent are they, carefully crafted for artistic effect and audience impact?
Yeah.
It's likely a complex interplay of both, genuine feeling and deliberate presentation.
Okay, so as we bring this all together, it seems overwhelmingly clear that Carnage's work, at least based on the material you've shared with us, is this incredibly intense, unfiltered exploration of some really fundamental human experiences.
Yeah.
That deep cut of betrayal.
Mm-hmm. The challenging path of an artist.
Right. The profound pain of loss and the often destructive power of anger. And these experiences are frequently examined through the lens of complex and sometimes deeply fractured relationships.
And what's particularly valuable here, I think, is how the different types of sources you provided, the raw emotionality of the lyrics, the more analytical breakdown of themes, and Carnage's own, unvarnished voice in those YouTube transcripts, they really offer us this layered, comprehensive understanding of these recurring motifs.
Yeah, you get the different perspectives.
Exactly. We get the raw emotion, the intellectual interpretation, and the immediate context, all contributing to a richer picture.
It certainly paints a powerful and often quite unsettling picture. So, for you, the listener who brought us this material, maybe consider this. How does Carnage use his art as a vehicle, really, to process and express such extreme emotions?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Does this raw honesty, however brutal it can sometimes be, does it forge a genuine connection with his audience? And what does it tell us about that often messy, complicated relationship between artistic creation and personal pain?
Yeah, find something to think about.
It is. It's definitely something to keep in mind as you perhaps revisit some of these tracks and videos with this context. Anyway, thanks so much for bringing this fascinating deep dive to our attention.
Yeah, this is really interesting stuff.
We're really looking forward to exploring whatever compelling material you send our way next time.